Online journalism. We're all familiar with it, and we probably see it on a daily basis, use it, seek it out. Online journalism is a modern journalism form where editorial or news content is published via the internet. I decided to look at online journalism and how millennials perceive it, how they get their news, where they get it from, and I'm typically hoping for the result to be from mostly online sources because online journalism is such a huge factor in today's society and today's news, and we live in a digital world and everything seems to be transforming to the internet and digital usage and less moving away from print and even broadcasts a little bit. So my research question is, how do millennials receive and perceive their news? My method that I used was in-depth interviews, and I interviewed 6 graduate students. 3 of them were females, 3 were males, and out of that same ratio, 3 were mass comm students and 3 were non-mass comm students because I wanted to talk to students that, media is kind of a focus in their life because of their graduate studies program, but also those who it is not as big of a focus, but as adults and millennials, I was hoping that they would still have a huge perspective to share on news and online journalism. The questions I asked were, how often do you seek out or receive news? From what medium do you get your news? Is that TV, radio, print, online site, applications, or social media? Which medium do you prefer and why? From which sources do you get your news? And are these the sources you ultimately prefer and why? The last question might seem a little confusing, but I kind of wanted to see if even, sometimes news is involuntarily thrust upon us because we see it in our social media news feeds, or we might come across it on our iPhone. When you swipe to the left of the search bar, there's often news stories that pop up there, or they're even on our Snapchat accounts. And so sometimes the sources we prefer isn't always how we end up receiving our news. So I wanted to see if, how, honestly, how do you receive your news? And is this how you prefer to receive it, or is there another method or way of receiving your news that you prefer? And I basically wanted to see how much online journalism played if it played a big role or not in that. So I asked the graduate students these questions, and here is what one of the graduate students said about the sources they prefer for their news and why they prefer them.
So social media and online news sites are my primary destinations because online, I it's very convenient, and I can also choose my sources. But so if I want to see it written from this angle, I can choose one place, and if I want to see it written from the other side, I can choose from another one, and that way I can see both sides. So I use Mashable, CNN, Washington Post, Huffington Post. Sometimes I use Refinery 29 and The Guardian too, just because I like the way that they write out situations and it fits with my beliefs. But I do sometimes go to other sources as well as just to see it from the other side.
That student was a female mass communications graduate studies major, and this next student is a male and he is an accounting major. And I asked him the same questions, and so here are what he chose as his sources and why he chose them.
I use Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Fox, and CNN for my news. I prefer online news sites because I can search and filter the site for specific info, and it's always pretty easily accessible.
So, based on what the previous 2 interviewees said, as well as the other 4, of course, the common answer for how often do you seek out or receive your news is daily, which was, I expected that because millennials like to be engaged. We're all about engagement and being in the now and knowing things. We're a little nosy. And so I expected that, and I was also glad to get those results because as the current generation, we're going into the workforce, so, we're finishing our degrees, we need to be informed on what is going on in society. For the second question, online websites and social media was the most common, which again I expected and hoped for, because the whole purpose of this project is online journalism, and to show its prominence in how millennials look at and see it, and of course it played a huge role in their perception. And not surprisingly, social media was the most common form of online journalism, because we are millennials and our entire lives are on Facebook and Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. So it is no surprise that this is also the places where we get our news as well. It could be from scrolling down your newsfeed on Twitter. Twitter is a big outlet for news. A lot of news outlets have Facebooks and Twitters, and some even have Snapchat accounts. And so online journalism is not just on mobile applications or online sites, but they have outlets on social media sites as well, because they know that this is a huge outlet for young adults and even some older adults. And so that's just another way for the news to engage in everyday life with their audience. For the third question, which medium do you prefer and why? Of course, no surprise, they of course chose the social media and online media, which was also the common answer for what medium they use to get their news. So of course they naturally preferred these. A lot of the reasons why is because on online sites, you can search and filter the site for specific information. Say you see a headline or you're looking for a specific news topic, it's very easy to find those on online sites, and they're also easily accessible. For social media, the common reason was for convenience, because on Facebook, not only can you see what your relatives are up to, your friends are doing, your neighbor who had a new baby, but you can also see and hear news about the recent attacks in Syria, or about the new White House budget that's being proposed, because those things are always available on social media as well. So that was not a surprise. Something that did surprise me a little was from which sources do you get your news. CNN and New York Times was the most common. That it doesn't seem surprising, because those are very reputable news sources and they're nationally renowned. So I figured those would be picked, but what surprised me is that CNN has received a lot of accusations of fake news in New York Times as well. And as millennials, we often feed into the status quo and what others are saying, but at the same time, we're pretty good about figuring things out ourselves. So it was kind of surprising to know that even though a lot of people have been talking about CNN and New York Times being false and fake news and being right-winged or left-wing, that these millennials I interviewed still preferred these as their news sources. They trusted these. And one student did point out that local news seems to have no reason to show bias, and they seem to just report the news with little or no comment. So that student preferred that method of news, but it was not common amongst all the interviewees. So overall, the millennials I interviewed seem to have a positive perception of online journalism, but not a 100% positive perception of news sources. They prefer some over the other, and some they don't trust or believe that they are biased towards right-winged or left-winged. And social media was definitely the most popular form of online journalism, because that is how people engage in everyday life. So, and not just with family and friends, but it's how they get their news as well. And so it was no surprise that that was the most popular form.